Welcome to TradeTheMBI.com. This is John. This report is for the 13th. And well, we just had a continuation of the same thing. It's another small day, but it just continues to escalate, the rising shakeout. And we've seen shorts continuing to rise through this, and we finally now have steel dipping below cyan, along with orange rises. We have what we would call the first signs of a bearish snake here. At the same time, green is just moved below red, which should indicate the potential for some broader weakness. So we'll keep an eye on that one because it's slightly at odds with the both shakeout rising as well as even on the NQ. The same situation here is a little bit different, where you have a complete reset of the steel. So it's like huge differences between where the S&P and the NASDAQ are trading, at least from a technical standpoint, that we can see behind the scenes. While price may look relatively consistent with the movements, far more strength in the NQ than we see on the broader S&P market. We talked about this peak coming in here for the euro, and sure enough, we get positive extreme that still has to be filled all the way down to here, and we're starting to fill that back in right now. We could see that weakness was building once we created the split right there. And all it's done is supported off the 23%, so that's going to be a key threshold to hold on to right there in the 17,233 range. Certainly worth keeping an eye on for another additional short all the way back down to the zero level. Though it doesn't have to go to the zero level because we don't have any dips below the red line that we did here. Those have all been filled with this secondary drop. So anything below that 23 is just merely going to be a reference of the DOC suggesting more short movement. And the fact that we're getting the steel crossing below cyan would be kind of that trigger point. Even if it comes back above, doesn't necessarily mean a buy at that point. It just means that we could be in a longer, broad, short decline. And so from a TLT standpoint, still holding right above that EBM green, keeps bouncing right back. Below it again is a reasonable short. Still think that we should be heading towards the 113 range in that, but been talking about that for a while, so we just have to play what is happening in between. Still don't see any softness in the oil. We should be getting a retest back to these lows. Would be key to see those break down a little bit further. The more oil breaks down from a supply standpoint, the better the inflationary picture is, because as we can see that core inflation that people actually pay has really gone up significantly, even though the government really doesn't count that as inflation. Real people know it. So the wage increases that we're starting to see are going to get absorbed by that to some degree, and that's generally the way it works. That will be a catalyst for gold going down the road, just not right yet. If we look at gold, we also can see the damage to Bitcoin continues now down to the 6,400 level. Had that brief little span right here where it started to improve off the rising gold in that, but below the 50%. Best you usually hope for is 38, but in this particular case, the drop-off on the Fibonacci lines was so dramatic that literally became the 100%, which is still below the 38. And of course, that suggested a retrace to the lows, and we got not only the retrace to the lows, but it made new lows. So you gotta like it when that configuration works out so beautifully. And let me just shrink the chart just a fraction going back, because the day really wasn't a whole lot. We ended up with gold here from the zero line, and it made quite a push. Interestingly enough, we would expect that to come back to the 0 point. It did shoot up to the highs, but you can see we ended up making it all the way back down to that 0 point. It was just a circuitous route to get there, interestingly enough. Oddly, even within a lot of this, we had very weak signals from a DOC standpoint. It wasn't until this spike here with the orange dipping down that we ended up at that brief spark, but it was overbought immediately with positive extremes, and that led to a beautiful DOC short. I mean, that's just as clean as it gets. For me, it's one of those where it starts here where you have green above, we're coming across orange like that, and steel coming from the top, and then boom, by the time the DOC hit was right there, just below the 76%, which in my mind, from the positive extremes, I usually like to attack towards the 100% line on those and look for, my primary one was this low right back here, which is exactly where the short kicked in, so it just meant it didn't have to sell on the visit to the full positive extreme. And then it was just a matter of waiting 3 or 4 bars before things just started to cascade lower, and then finally collapsed down to the 0 marker, and we got a full reset with the DOC and the orange coming all the way down from there, and that led to a pretty decent move. And then once we got back over the 50%, traded right in between there, and then as we ended the day, we ended up with this huge spike that led back to the highs, which we've already seen another gold come in. It dipped down to the 50% and is already making itself all the way back up to those highs. Shakeout's still strong on this one, so again, it'd probably be another one of those good setups where we get a dip and get a nice DOC spread, or even, for that matter, a strong short signal should be a pretty good catalyst for a move back to the 50% again. But particularly in pre-market, when you get the rise, if it comes back prior to the pre-market, I would expect it will retrace a good portion of this. That's the long and the short of it. Not too long to the open here. It was a little late getting this report out, but I think that we're seeing that there's just the general goodwill, and you got to keep that in mind, that there's just no real incentive to offload. So people who are expecting major dump at this particular point, probably a little bit premature in their hope. As always, trade well. We'll talk again later.